So, Queen Camilla is supposedly suffering from severe mental exhaustion and major depression, and the story about why she's suddenly so unwell completely falls apart the second you look at the timeline. Because according to palace insiders, this entire health crisis didn't start after months of public pressure or media scrutiny. It started the moment King Charles III made it clear he was about to hand Princess Anne full control over the royal family's private finances. That's not a coincidence. That's not bad timing. That's the kind of detail that makes you go, wait, what? And honestly, the fact that nobody in the palace is willing to answer the obvious question is the weird part. So, before we get into the details, if you're new here, we break down royal drama as it actually happens. So, hit subscribe to my channel real quick. It helps more than you know. So, here's where it gets interesting. King Charles III has apparently been planning a major shakeup of how the royal household handles its money. And we're not talking about pocket change, we're talking about the Privy Purse, which is the official body that manages the monarch's private finances, living expenses, and the internal operating budget for the entire royal family. This is the financial backbone of the palace. Whoever controls this controls how money moves through the institution. And according to reports, King Charles wanted his younger sister, Princess Anne, to oversee it. Now, if you know anything about Princess Anne, this makes complete sense. She's famously disciplined. She's known for having a relentless work ethic. She doesn't do fluff. She doesn't do waste. She's the kind of person who shows up to 4 engagements in a day and still looks annoyed that there aren't 5. So when King Charles looked at the royal household and saw bloat and unnecessary spending, putting Anne in charge of cleaning it up was probably the most logical decision he could make. The problem is that this decision directly threatened Camilla. And this is where the story takes a turn because according to multiple sources, Camilla didn't just disagree with this move. She saw it as an existential threat to her position. If Anne controlled the purse strings, then Camilla's influence over internal resources would basically evaporate. And beyond the money, there was something else. Jealousy. King Charles trusts Anne completely. That's not just a sibling thing, that's a lifetime of Anne proving she's reliable. Camilla, on the other hand, has spent years trying to solidify her role. So when she saw that trust being handed to Anne, something shifted. Now, I want to pause here because this is where the timeline gets really strange. If Camilla was genuinely suffering from mental exhaustion caused by public pressure, you'd expect her health to decline gradually over months or even years. You'd expect there to be visible signs during public engagements. You'd expect staff to notice small changes over time. But according to the reports, none of that happened. Instead, her sudden deterioration coincided almost perfectly with the moment she learned about the king's plan. That's not how mental health crises typically work. That's how a strategy works. And the strategy, according to palace sources, was surprisingly calculated. Camilla allegedly hired a private physician in Chelsea to create a fabricated medical dossier. And not just a vague note saying she was feeling unwell. We're talking about an official medical report diagnosing her with severe mental exhaustion and major depression. The kind of document that would make any husband pause. The kind of document that would make a king reconsider his decisions. Now, I want to be clear about what's being alleged here. The claim is that Camilla contacted this doctor directly, that she asked him to prepare a file stating that her condition was caused by relentless public pressure and that she offered financial compensation in exchange for falsifying the diagnosis. If that's true, then this isn't just a case of someone exaggerating their symptoms. This is a coordinated effort to manipulate the king's compassion. And here's where it gets even more uncomfortable. Once Camilla had the falsified medical report in hand, she reportedly began appearing before King Charles, looking visibly haggarded, drawn face, weary eyes. The whole performance, she would break down in tears. She would plead with him to reconsider, and she framed her argument in a way that was designed to sound selfless. She told him that if he gave her control of the Privy Purse instead of Anne, it would give her a sense of purpose. It would help her recover. It would be the motivation she needed to heal. That's a very specific kind of manipulation. It takes a position of weakness and turns it into a demand for power. She wasn't just asking him to slow down the transition, she was asking him to reverse it and hand her the exact authority he was planning to give to Anne. And she used her health as the justification. That's not a small thing. That's the kind of move that only works if the person on the receiving end is emotionally invested enough to overlook the logic. And for a while it seemed like it might actually work. King Charles reportedly began to waver. He saw his wife looking exhausted. He had a medical report in his hands. He was caught between his plan to streamline the palace and his instinct to protect his spouse. That's a difficult position for anyone, and Camilla knew exactly how to exploit it. But then she made another move, and this is where the story gets even more revealing. According to the reports, she didn't stop at asking for control of the privy purse. She also demanded a written commitment from King Charles, transferring all of the late Queen Elizabeth II's symbolic jewelry collections to her and to her children from her previous marriage. That's not a small ask. Those are priceless pieces tied to the history of the monarchy, and the fact that she brought this up in the middle of a conversation about her mental health tells you everything you need to know about her actual priorities. If the goal was truly to recover, why would she need jewelry? Why would she need a written pledge about inheritance? Why would she need financial security for her children from a previous marriage? Those aren't things that help someone recover from depression. Those are things that help someone consolidate power. And that's exactly what Princess Anne started to notice. Now, Princess Anne is not someone who misses details. She's sharp. She's observant. And according to the report, she began to suspect something was off. When she noticed Camilla making secret phone calls whenever the king left the room, the pattern was consistent. King Charles would step out of his study. Camilla would immediately pull out her phone and start speaking at a hushed tone, and the way she behaved on those calls didn't match the image of someone suffering from severe mental exhaustion. She was too focused, too calculated, too deliberate. So Anne did something very direct. She placed a trusted servant on the palace cleaning staff assigned to Camilla's quarters, and that servant eventually managed to photograph the contents of Camilla's phone. Call logs, message exchanges, the whole thing. And when Anne reviewed the evidence, she found exactly what she suspected. The private physician in Chelsea, the same name on the medical diagnosis, the same number appearing repeatedly in Camilla's call history. At this point, Anne didn't wait for permission. She didn't go through channels. She went directly to the doctor's clinic and confronted him. And this is where the story shifts from suspicion to confirmation, because according to the reports, the doctor initially tried to defend his work. He claimed the diagnosis was based on proper medical procedures, but when Anne showed him the call records and the message exchanges, he collapsed. He admitted that Camilla had contacted him, that she had offered financial compensation, that the diagnosis was entirely fabricated, that there were no actual health indicators supporting the claims of mental exhaustion or depression. That confession changed everything. Anne now had a living witness and a complete body of evidence. She had screenshots, she had testimony, she had the doctor's admission, and she took all of it directly to King Charles. Now, imagine being King Charles in that moment. You've spent weeks worrying about your wife's health. You've been reconsidering a major financial decision because you wanted to support her. And then your sister walks into your study and places a dossier in front of you showing that the entire thing was staged. That's not just disappointing, that's deeply humiliating. According to the reports, and laid it all out, the fabricated medical indicators, the secret negotiations, the financial arrangement, the fact that Camilla's exhausted appearance was part of a coordinated performance designed to manipulate his compassion. And then she connected it to the larger goal. Camilla didn't want to recover. She wanted control. She wanted the privy purse. She wanted the jewelry. She wanted to secure her position and her children's inheritance. The health crisis was just a tool. King Charles reportedly sat in silence. He was shocked. And then he did something that suggests he understood the full weight of the situation. He convened an emergency meeting of the Royal Council. Not a private conversation, not a quiet resolution, a full meeting with the core members of the council present. And Anne brought the doctor into that meeting as a witness. The doctor stood in the middle of the chamber and confessed everything. He broke down every fabricated indicator. He explained how Camilla had directed the process. He confirmed the financial arrangement. And with that testimony on record, the entire performance collapsed. There was no room for denial, no way to spin it. The evidence was sitting on the table. King Charles then delivered his judgment. He announced that all previous considerations regarding Camilla's authority were revoked. She was stripped of all control over resources, budgets, and internal affairs. She lost every privilege connected to access to royal finances or inheritance. And then he went further. He ordered her expelled from Buckingham Palace immediately that night. That's a stunning escalation. This wasn't a temporary separation. This wasn't a cooling off period. This was an official removal from the palace grounds. The guards were instructed to enforce it without delay. And according to the reports, Camilla was forced to pack her belongings in silence while the rain poured down outside. She had no argument, no defense, no way to salvage the situation. The image described in the reports is almost cinematic. Camilla stepping out into the courtyard as the rain intensified, her tears mixing with the rainwater, her voice breaking as she cried out to Charles, asking how he could treat her this way after half a lifetime together. But here's the thing. She wasn't asking why he was being cruel. She was asking why her plan didn't work. She was asking why she lost everything in a single night. And that's a very different question because when you actually look at what was said versus what happened, the contradiction is glaring. Camilla claimed she was suffering from mental exhaustion caused by public pressure, but the evidence showed she was actively coordinating with a doctor to fabricate that diagnosis. She claimed she wanted to recover, but her demands were about money, jewels, and inheritance. She claimed she was too weak to handle the pressure, but she was strong enough to execute a multi-step manipulation campaign. That's not a health crisis. That's a power grab. And the fact that she framed it as a health crisis makes it worse because it exploits the very compassion that King Charles was trying to show her. It weaponizes empathy. And here's the part that really stands out to me. Princess Anne didn't need to do any of this. She could have stayed quiet. She could have let the situation play out, but she didn't. She saw something wrong, and she acted. And the reason she was able to act is because she paid attention to the details. The secret phone calls, the timing, the inconsistency between Camilla's public presentation and her private behavior. That's what uncovered the truth. So what's the deeper lesson here? I think it's pretty simple. Transparency matters, not just in institutions, but in relationships. When someone asks for power and justifies it by pointing to their own suffering, you have to ask whether the suffering is real or whether it's being used as leverage. And when someone refuses to answer direct questions, when they deflect, when they cry at convenient moments, that's not proof of vulnerability. Sometimes it's proof of strategy. Camilla reportedly stood outside the gates of Buckingham Palace as they closed behind her. The rain was still falling. She had nothing left, no position, no dignity, no access to the finances or the jewelry she had demanded. And the worst part for her is that she did it to herself. She built the entire plan. She hired the doctor. She staged the illness. She pushed for more and more until the whole thing collapsed under its own weight. And now the question is whether King Charles will ever trust her again. Because once trust is broken like that, it doesn't come back easily. And the fact that he was willing to expel her immediately suggests he understood that he didn't need time to think. He didn't need to consult anyone else. He saw the evidence, and he acted. But beyond the immediate fallout, there's a larger conversation happening inside the palace right now about what this means for the monarchy's future. Because this wasn't just a personal betrayal, it was an attempt to redirect royal resources and symbolic assets away from the institution and into private hands. And that's something the palace has always guarded against. The line between the crown and the individual has been carefully maintained for centuries. Once someone tries to blur that line for personal gain, the entire system reacts. And that's exactly what happened here. The council didn't hesitate and didn't hesitate. And the king, despite whatever personal pain he might have felt, didn't hesitate either because this wasn't about whether Camilla was a good wife or a supportive companion. It was about whether the monarchy could allow itself to be manipulated from within. And the answer was no. Now there are still questions about what happens next. Will Camilla retreat quietly to a private residence? Or will she attempt to push back through her own connections? Will her children from her previous marriage attempt to challenge the revocation of inheritance promises? And will the palace release any official statement about the separation? Or will they simply allow the silence to speak for itself? Those questions matter, but they're secondary to the central fact. The plan failed, the manipulation was exposed, And the person who exposed it was the one person Camilla never expected to be watching. Princess Anne, the sister who doesn't seek attention, the royal who doesn't chase headlines, the one who simply does the work and notices when something doesn't add up. That's the real story here. Not just the downfall of a queen consort, but the quiet competence of a princess who understood that loyalty to the crown means protecting it from everyone, even from the people standing inside the palace walls. So yeah, the story is dramatic, but the lesson is pretty simple. If you have to fake a breakdown to get what you want, you probably shouldn't have it in the first place. And if you're going to manipulate someone, maybe don't do it in front of Princess Anne because she will notice, she will investigate, and she will bring the receipts. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in the next